Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Aram. Tensions remain high along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. The neighbors met in Istanbul for a second round of talks aimed at easing hostilities and curbing cross-border attacks. This follows initial discussions in Doha earlier this month, where both sides agreed to a temporary ceasefire and a roadmap for continued negotiations. The meetings come after a surge in violence that left dozens dead on both sides, following Islamabad's claims that Afghan-based militants carried out deadly raids. But can the two lay the foundation for a ceasefire that truly holds in the long term? Nili Kozad has more.
Along one of the world's most volatile and porous borders, the guns have fallen silent, at least for now. Just 2 weeks ago, Afghanistan and Pakistan were locked in fierce cross-border clashes that left dozens dead, including civilians. The fighting erupted after Pakistan launched air and artillery strikes on Afghan territory, targeting a senior member from the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP, an offshoot militant group that it accuses Kabul of sheltering. Afghanistan's Taliban-led regime denied the allegations and retaliated by firing back at Pakistani border posts. Islamabad says peace hinges on this matter most.
This was very clearly spelled out that there won't be any incursions and TTP will not have any facility on their soil. We kept on repeating, and obviously they deny it, but in an implied way both the countries, Turkey and Doha, Qatar, they pressed upon them that this is the main bone of contention.
The ceasefire, hastily brokered in Doha and mediated by Qatar and Turkey, gave both sides a chance to step back from the brink. In Istanbul, negotiators reconvened to outline mechanisms for monitoring the ceasefire to prevent any further escalation. But deep mistrust and uncertainty persists. Since the Taliban's takeover in 2021, ties between Kabul and Islamabad have been strained due to militant activity, disputed borders, and mutual accusations of interference. But beyond the two neighbors, regional powers are also watching closely. So far, the Taliban has only gained Russia's formal recognition, while maintaining some diplomatic engagement with actors like India. However, China, which has invested heavily in Pakistan through its Belt and Road Initiative, has urged restraint, warning that renewed instability could threaten regional trade and security.
Pakistan and Afghanistan are both friendly neighbors of China. We support the two countries in remaining calm, achieving a lasting ceasefire, and resolving differences through dialogue.
For now, diplomacy has bought some time, though local markets are already experiencing food shortages and soaring prices because of the border closure. But as history shows, truces between Kabul and Islamabad rarely last without trust, accountability, and sincere cooperation. And while the guns may be silent today, the question remains, for how long? Nili Kozad, Straight Talk.
For more, joining me now from Islamabad is former Afghanistan and Pakistan AP News Director Kathy Gannon. From Kabul, American University of Afghanistan, Adjunct lecturer Obaidullah Baheer, and also from Islamabad, Initiate Futures think tank president Hamzah Rifaat. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining me now. I mean, the geopolitical agenda has been quite packed over the past year. You have Gaza, you have Ukraine, you have Israel, Iran, and I mean, this is all sucking up bandwidth from analysts and viewers alike. So a lot of people have kind of forgotten about Afghanistan, let alone the Afghanistan-Pakistan border and the situation there. I mean, before we get into this conversation, Kathy, I want to begin with you. I mean, what's in question right now? What's the major issue between Pakistan and Afghanistan? Why are they talking? Why are they meeting?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really been a particularly increase in the tensions between the two countries And so Pakistan is really feels that the TTP, the Pakistan Taliban, are coming across, and there's been a number of attacks in Pakistan. And the Afghans, from their side, they also feel that they're being falsely accused, but they also feel that the line that separates the two countries, the Duran line, is not one that they accept. And so the problem between the two countries is not new. It's an old problem. And this ceasefire, while it will stop the fighting initially, the problem is much deeper and much longer for them to find a ceasefire that will really take.
So this issue between Afghanistan and Pakistan has brought new three-letter acronyms into our life. Obviously, the TTP, the TTA, the BLA, new groups, and a lot of people aren't familiar with who these people are. So Obaidullah, who are the TTP? Who's backing them? Where'd they come from? What are their objectives?
Hi, Yusuf. Thank you for having me on and discussing this very important topic. First off, the TTA is a silly acronym that the Pakistani establishment has made for the Taliban in Afghanistan. It's a way to delegitimize them as a ruling entity. The TTP, however, is a group that emerged within the tribal regions of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. They emerged in the 2006-2007s. These were people who were helping Afghan Taliban, who were helping the Arabs that were there. Their fight seems to have expanded from being good Taliban, certain elements within them, including Hafiz Gul Bahadur, who the Pakistani state helped and used. They've become threats to the Pakistani establishment, and we've seen operations conducted against them. The TTP are attacking military installations inside Pakistan, and the conversation has boiled down to Afghanistan being blamed for the TTP attacks. Now, we have to realize that the Pakistani government started blaming successive Afghan governments in 2010 regarding the TTP. So it begs the question as to why different governments within Afghanistan would ally themselves with a group that is organic to Pakistan and has its own political goals. It also murkies the waters when it comes to negotiations between both sides, because the expectation is that the Afghan Taliban supposedly have so much influence over the TTP that they can ask them to forego their grievances, forego their political and military goals. The BLA are a Baloch Liberation Army. They are Baloch separatists who aren't even Islamists. So linking that as well to Pakistan. And Pakistan blames Afghanistan for BLA sanctuaries as well. And at the end of it is all a great big Indian boogeyman who supposedly uses Afghanistan as a proxy land. I guess just not taking responsibility for internal issues, natural reactions to bad policies, and hammer-like approaches have brought us to a point where everything is scapegoated on Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. So, Hamzah, Obaidullah saying, there's been successive Afghan governments who have tried to deal with this issue. What makes Pakistan feel that the Taliban have the influence to be able to stop this, the responsibility to be able to stop this? This seems like an inherited problem. Do you agree with that? Or do you say, no, the Taliban could stop this in a day if they wanted to?
Well, first of all, if you take a look at the Afghan Taliban takeover of 2021, since then, and it's been about a 4-year period, alpha elements such as the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the Baloch Rajoy Ajoy Sangar, which is brass, we don't call them BLA anymore, they're an amalgamation of different Baloch groups. They've all been operating on Afghan soil. And the reason why Pakistan feels that the onus is on the Afghan government to get its house into order is because if you take a look at the spike in attacks, and I would like to quote the findings from the Pakistan Institute for Conflict and Security Studies in Islamabad, which actually claimed that the spike in terrorist attacks in the first quarter of 2025 exceeded the entire year of 2024. That's the kind of spike of attacks which are actually taking place on Pakistani soil. The Afghan Taliban and the TTP, we consider them to be political cousins. We consider them to be sister organizations. The Afghan Taliban, ever since it assumed power in Kabul, has not been able to clamp down on alpha elements being exported into Pakistan, which has resulted in these border clashes actually taking place. Now, if you take a look at the border clashes which have taken place earlier in this month, it was, we call them the Fitnat al-Kharij, or the group which is known to basically assassinate and kill innocent people. Now, the Afghan Taliban denies responsibility for it. They claim that they're beyond their writ. And but if that really is the case, why during the Istanbul process have they been urging Islamabad to hold talks with the TTP to try and diffuse the crisis? I think that's a huge sticking point. And if you take a look at the Istanbul process in general, I mean, one of the reasons why we cannot have an everlasting, long-standing, sustainable agreement is because the Afghan Taliban is not ready to give guarantees to Islamabad that its soil will not be used to target Pakistan. And they will not lend political, military, or financial support to the TTP. There is a credibility crisis. It's a historical one. We aren't exactly the best of neighbors. The Durand line has been a huge flashpoint, but that doesn't mean that Pakistan will tolerate terrorist attacks on its soil. And we do not believe that there should be any regime change in Afghanistan. We urge the Afghan Taliban to get its house in order because, frankly speaking, it's not only the TTP and the brass, it's also the East Turkestan Islamic movement, as well as, the ISKP as well, and they're all operating on Afghan soil. So it's not a Pakistan-specific problem. It's on the Afghan Taliban to get its house in order.
Kathy, you're an outsider to this, but you're on the inside. And I mean, you've been following this issue for many, many years, and I think you have a very educated view on this. I mean, when you hear both sides talking about this issue, defending their positions, what are areas they can come together on, and what are the real big flashpoints that they're still miles and miles apart from each other?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. First, I'd like to say that no one is without blame in this region, whether it's Pakistan, whether it's Afghanistan, or whether it's India. Now, the Baluch Liberation Army, which is a group that is against the Pakistan government, it was in Kandahar. Certainly in 2018, the head of the BLA blew himself up in a neighborhood in Kandahar, supposedly trying to put together a car bomb. And certainly the Islamic State has also territory inside Pakistan. And every country in this region, whether it's Pakistan, whether it's Afghanistan, or whether it's India, they do use these militants as proxies. And there's longstanding relationships between different groups that the Afghan Taliban is actually outright using the Pakistani Taliban against Afghanistan. I don't think there's been proof of that, but certainly there are relationships between the Pakistani Taliban and the Afghanistan government, the Taliban, who are now the government in Afghanistan. So there are relationships, and they go very deep. There are relationships within Pakistan between different militant groups that also go very deep. And there are militants that are being used by India. And the problem in this region is that you have disputes between Pakistan and India, disputes between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and each one tries to do something to the other. And the problem is that it just keeps escalating. And in this case now, we've reached probably one of the greatest escalations to date, with the use of fighter jets going deep inside Afghanistan territory. And I think at the root of this, while there are deep dislikes among the different countries and troubles among the different countries, the issue is the militants themselves. And how do you put an end to the use of militants? And until you find a way to solve the disputes between the countries, whether it's between Afghanistan and Pakistan, which is the Durand line, which is the border that separates the two countries. And since the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan, the Pakistan army has finished a fence that demarcates that border. And there certainly is a strong resistance within Afghanistan to accept that that is the border between the two countries. And then you, of course, have the dispute over between Pakistan and India. And all three countries have used these militants as proxies. And there's it's a deep issue, and it's one that is not easily tackled, but it is one that has to be, because the militant groups are only proliferating, and they're the only ones that are benefiting from this. And the Afghanistan Taliban are having their own issues, and they're not supporting all the groups that might be there, nor is Pakistan supporting the ones here, nor is India abusing all the ones that are there. So, but it's a real issue that has to be dealt with, and that means settling the disputes between the countries.
Okay. Obaidullah, you heard Hamzah a couple minutes ago, and he was basically saying, there's a national security threat emanating from Afghanistan to my country, Pakistan, he was saying, and we need to take care of that security threat. Now, do you feel that there's any justification in that Pakistan should be able to take care of their concerns, or do you think Pakistan is abusing this to be able to have some type of leverage or some type of influence inside Afghanistan? Because, I mean, when you look at international law, there is a precedent for cross-border operations regarding counterterrorism.
So it's funny you mentioned international law. I mean, I think the soul of international law says that you have to discriminate between civilian and military targets, and that you have to respect sovereignty of other nations and their ability to take action. There is only one country in the past few years before the Pakistani bombings that has gone around bombing other nations, sovereign nations, and killing their civilians. And I don't even need to name that nation. So this whole attitude of every time I'm hurt by an insurgent group, I will hurt civilians on the other side is quite a barbaric approach, to say the least. I think at the core of all of this is Pakistan's refusal to acknowledge its own political failures, its security failures. The TTP did not emerge from a vacuum. They are a response to military operations within the region. Their response to drone strikes that have killed dozens of and scores of civilians within Pakistan, and now then bombings within Afghanistan that they have nothing to show for. We heard rumors that they hit the TTP head, Nur Wali Masood. We heard rumors that they hit Hafiz Gul Bahadur, all of which turned out to be lies. This approach doesn't help. They have to start talking to these groups. The more they call them fitna khawarij, which is them trying to expel them out of Islam and call them infidels, that really doesn't, that sort of othering, that sort of friend-enemy distinction with your own population, with your own people, maybe you should start recognizing the Durand Line as your own border. Then you will start seeing these Pashtun people as people who belong to that state and actually care for them and have discussions with them. And that isn't happening. At the last bit, I want to remind your viewers that no one's denying that the Afghan Taliban does not have any contacts with the TTP. They have helped Pakistan in the past by mediating in conversations between both sides. However, that sort of influence should not be confused for control. The Afghan Taliban cannot ask the TTP to forgo its political goals and its grievances just to appease Pakistan, especially in the absence of any assurances from Pakistan regarding cross-border bombing, regarding ISKP and their hideouts within Pakistan. And again, I don't need to remind your viewers, we shouldn't have an amnesia of Pakistan playing with fire and entertaining a lot of these supposed terrorist groups that they are having trouble with dealing right now. Hillary Clinton asked them, warned them not to keep snakes in their backyard. And now if they're biting, I don't know why everything ends up being Afghanistan's fault.
Mm-hmm. Hamzah, you heard Obaidullah. I mean, he's saying that this is well beyond the response to a national security concern. I mean, he's saying there's civilians being targeted, other targets, likening it to some mysterious country which has done very similar things in the very recent past. So, I mean, what do you say to that? And also, very quickly, are there any other third-party countries in the region that might be benefiting from this tension between Afghanistan and Pakistan?
Well, Yusuf, let me just be very clear. I think if you take a look at any other country in the international community who is under consistent attacks, and we've relayed it to the Taliban government, we've had diplomatic initiatives with them before. Our delegations, not only our delegations at the federal level, but also at the provincial level, have tried to relay to the Taliban government to stop militancy. It's not as if we're coming up with a strategy of hot pursuit and, so-called violating Afghan sovereignty out of the blue. It's been a consistent, you could say, mode of denial and plausible deniability from the Afghan Taliban government with regard to militancy, which prompted Islamabad to take these steps. I'm not in favor of civilian deaths. I'm not in favor of civilian deaths on the Afghan side of the border, nor on the Pakistan side of the border. But the Afghan Taliban government is a huge problem and hurdle. which actually prevents from any everlasting peace and, you could say, sustainable dialogue to actually take place between the two countries. Now, the recently held Moscow format, I mean, the Russians and the Chinese, who have actually, Russia just recently recognized the Afghan Taliban government, and the Chinese have had back channel talks with the Afghan Taliban government since the fall of Kabul in 2021. Even they relate to the Taliban that you need to keep militancy in check in order for investments to actually take place. Pakistan itself, despite our economic problems, want to help Afghanistan get out of the economic quagmire, where almost 90% of the population is living on less than $1.25 a day. But that cannot take place in the presence of militancy. So while I do understand that hot pursuit is never really justifiable over, you could say, very shady claims, but Pakistan's claim is vindicated by the very fact. If you take a look at the statistics and the uptick in violence, which has resulted in the deaths of Pakistani civilians, not only in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, but also in Balochistan as well, by Baloch militants. Another point that I would like to make is that when Afghanistan, and we've recently had the conflagration between India and Pakistan in May 2025, when their foreign minister goes to New Delhi and goes to Subramaniam Jaishankar, and it's actually quite ironic because the Indians have always had a problem with the Taliban government previously. So this is more about strategic power play. So Pakistan will never tolerate a policy of encirclement where we have the Afghans on one hand who are persistent with plausible deniability, and the Indians who want to cash in on this, as they did cash in on this during 1971. But that doesn't mean I do not condone civilian deaths. But the Afghan Taliban is basically responsible for this current conflagration.
Kathy, I want to ask you about the Turks. I mean, when we look at the Trump ceasefire deal on Gaza, standing right next to Trump is Erdogan. When you look at the grain corridor deal with the United Nations being involved between Russia and Ukraine, standing next to UN Secretary General Guterres is Erdogan. Is Turkey the right country to be bringing Afghanistan and Pakistan together on this issue? I mean, can they be a platform, and can they be more than a platform, being negotiators, helping solve these problems?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think Turkey is one country that can assist. I think all the countries in the region can assist. I think both Obaidullah and Hamzah both make good points. But if you sift through everything that is being said, at the end of the day, it's about the militants that exist in the region, and it's how to deal with these militants. Afghanistan needs to deal with them, Pakistan needs to deal with them, and India also needs to not be using them. And so it's a regional issue that is a quite serious issue, and I certainly think Turkey has a role to play. I think it is important that this issue be looked at because all countries have used militants as proxies for their agendas, whether it's Pakistan certainly has used them, as has Afghanistan and has allowed them there, as has India. So unless that issue is really put on the table, and how do you deal with the many militant groups that certainly the Afghans don't want there, those that are here that Pakistan doesn't want here, there has to be a serious look at how to deal with this. And I certainly think Turkey has an interest and has a history and an ability to understand the depth of the problem. But I certainly think unless any ceasefire that is reached, it will be temporary, and it won't get to the heart of some of the issues between the countries. It'll continue to be this country blaming this country, the other country blaming the other country. And in fact, they all bear blame. The question now is, how do you get to a solution that frees all the countries from the militants that are in the countries? And that's a difficult issue. And I certainly think Turkey, as well as other regional countries, certainly have a role to play. And maybe Turkey, in a way, understands perhaps even better the problem that is being that needs to be dealt with in this area.
Well, Kathy, as you said, both sides make very, very good points. And generally, when both sides make great points, it's actually a very tough issue to resolve. But Turkey, a close friend to both countries, and hopefully they can play a proactive role. Guys, I'm out of time. I really enjoyed your commentary Obaidullah, Hamzah, Kathy, thanks for joining me. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Air. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find more exclusive content. Until next time, take care and goodbye.